Before we go any deeper into this real prison story, hit the like button, drop a comment, and subscribe, because inside these walls, every second is a battle for survival. The dawn shift had barely started when the first alarm cut through the concrete silence of Coldwater State Penitentiary, a high-security prison known for lockdowns, inmate interrogations, and the constant hum of surveillance cameras. Most inmates were still sealed inside their steel-frame cells, the corridors washed in a cold blue glow from the flickering overhead lights. But something was wrong. Even the guards felt it, an unease that spread faster than the alarm itself. In Cell Block E, the tier where the most volatile inmates were kept under strict supervision, Officer Ramirez moved cautiously along the walkway. He'd worked enough prison documentaries to know the pattern. Too much silence meant danger. Below him, tattooed inmates stirred behind reinforced glass fronts, whispering about the alarm, flashing quick glances at each other like they knew something he didn't. Coldwater wasn't a place where secrets survived long, but it was a place where they could kill. As Ramirez reached E214, he paused. The narrow observation window was fogged from the inside, a detail that didn't make sense. In solitary confinement, the temperature stayed cold enough to discourage condensation. Inside, the light flickered. He tapped the glass once. No response. E214, stand back from the door. Nothing. He signaled to Central Control. Inside the cell, inmate Marcus Hale, a heavily tattooed repeat offender known for quiet discipline and a near-obsessive routine, was serving 30 days in solitary after a failed altercation involving contraband. Hale wasn't the type to cause chaos. He was calculating, calm, and always 3 steps ahead. Guards called him Blueprint, because every move he made looked like part of a larger design. But when the cell door finally slid open, Blueprint wasn't standing. He wasn't even visible. Instead, the guards found something that froze the entire tier, a neatly folded prison shirt on the bed, next to a strip of torn bedsheet tied into a knot. Not a rope, just a knot. A message. Or a warning. And Hale was gone. Inside solitary confinement, gone. The cell had only one door, one vent, one camera. Yet the camera feed from that entire night had been corrupted, replaced with static at the exact moment Hale vanished. A jail investigation team was already on standby, rushing toward the block, but every guard knew what this meant. This wasn't an escape. It was an inside job. Ramirez scanned the cell again. The vent screws were untouched. The bed was made with military precision. No blood, no struggle, no signs of forced removal. Just a single smear on the wall. Dust, not fluid, shaped like a fingerprint dragging downward. Like someone steadying themselves. The inmates on the tier started banging on their doors, shouting that they'd seen shadows moving, guards whispering, lights going out. The lockdown siren triggered automatically, slamming steel barriers across every tier. A harsh blue light swept through the block, amplifying the tension in every tattooed face pressed against cell windows. Coldwater had seen prison escape attempts before, tunnels, disguises, guard manipulation, but nothing like this. Solitary confinement was airtight. Escape-proof. The warden arrived within minutes. Warden Keller, a rigid, stern figure with a reputation built on discipline and zero tolerance, stepped into the cell with her gloves on, her voice low but sharp. She studied the knot, the folded shirt, the dust streak, the vent, the camera mount. Someone helped him, she muttered. And someone else erased the evidence. Investigators pushed deeper. Hale's file showed a pattern. No gang affiliation, no recent fights, no obvious enemies. But he had something far more dangerous, patience. And tattoos that traced his entire back and arms with coded symbols, including one particular spiral pattern investigators had flagged months earlier but never deciphered. The lead investigator, Davis, replayed the broken camera feed again, scrubbing frame by frame through static. Nothing. And yet, there was a repeating pulse in the distortion. Too rhythmic to be accidental. He enhanced the audio, cutting through layers of white noise until he heard it. Tap, 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 tap. 3 short taps. Pause. 2 taps. Pause. Then 1. Davis froze. That's inmate code, he said. A movement signal. Someone had tapped a message through the wall, timed, deliberate, coordinated. Ramirez stepped back, scanning the surrounding solitary cells. Every inmate in this block, every single one, had tattoos indicating long histories with gangs, criminal networks, or prison crews. But none of them were known to be connected to Marcus Hale. Unless the guards had been wrong. Unless Hale had alliances that were invisible by design. As investigators worked, a guard shouted from the far end of the hallway. "We've got a second anomaly." Everyone rushed over. Another solitary cell, E219, had its food slot lock jammed with a tiny piece of metal. Not homemade, machine cut. Something from inside the facility. Too precise to be random. And the inmate inside, Jax Turner, a tattoo-covered former gang strategist, stood motionless, staring at the wall as if waiting for someone to arrive. When Davis questioned him, Jax didn't blink, didn't shift, didn't speak. He simply raised one hand and tapped his finger twice on the concrete. 2 taps. Matching the code pattern. Matching the signal from the corrupted feed. Matching the timing that preceded Marcus Hale's disappearance. Just as Davis opened his mouth to demand an explanation, another alarm detonated across the block. Every guard spun toward the sound. This one wasn't about Hale. Something new had been found. Something far worse. Inside the ventilation crawlspace above E206, a maintenance worker's flashlight landed on a fresh set of dusty fingerprints smeared along the metal, descending, not climbing. Like someone had been lowered into the vent, not escaped through it. And directly beneath the prints, a torn piece of fabric tattooed with blue ink patterns matching Marcus Hale's shoulder tattoo. It wasn't just a clue. It was a message. Marcus Hale hadn't escaped the prison. He had been moved. And whoever moved him was still inside. The morning after the incident felt colder than usual, the kind of cold that seeped through concrete and tightened every muscle in the cell blocks. The prison remained under a partial lockdown, and every corridor carried the same heavy echo. Boots, clipped radio calls, and the metallic ring of doors tested and retested for weaknesses. Inside the administrative wing, a conference room lit by flickering fluorescent panels had become the command center. At the center table sat Internal Affairs investigator Evan Marlowe, a calm but unrelenting presence. His reputation. He didn't raise his voice, but he didn't miss a single detail. Thin lines of fatigue marked his face. His notebook was already filled. Across from him, Warden Hale flipped through camera logs. The incident in C block doesn't add up, Hale muttered. The inmate found unconscious in the solitary corridor, no signs of a struggle, but everyone heard the thud. And the inmate wasn't supposed to be in that wing at all, Marlowe added. Someone let him through. Tension thickened the room. They started with the surveillance footage. Pixelated blue-tinted feeds captured angles of long hallways, empty stairwells, and solitary wing doors. One camera showed a blurred figure, tall, tattooed arms visible beneath a uniform sleeve. But the video glitched at the exact moment the figure reached the hallway corner. A deliberate cut? Or malfunction? Marlowe rewound the footage again. This camera has no history of technical issues, he said, tone flat. Someone wanted this section blind. Warden Hale didn't respond. He didn't need to. Interviews began immediately. The first called in was inmate Riker, a broad man with faded sleeve tattoos curling up his neck. He sat with his hands cuffed, eyes shifting toward the door every few seconds. Marlowe asked him calmly, "Where were you during the time of the incident?" Riker shrugged. "Cell block D." Asked the guards. "I don't walk into solitary. Nobody does unless they're dragged." But Marlowe watched the small tells, the twitch near the eye, fingers tapping the table. Signs of withheld truth. "What did you hear?" Marlowe pressed. Riker paused. "Just footsteps. More than one. Fast. Like someone wasn't supposed to be there." He swallowed hard. "And someone whispering. A warning maybe. Could have been a guard. Could have been another inmate." He leaned back, tattoos shifting under the dim light. The air changed, man. You could feel something bad coming. The next interview was Officer Lennox, a young guard fresh out of academy training. His uniform looked crisp, but his eyes were uneasy. Marlowe's tone didn't rise. "Your key card registered near the solitary wing at the exact time the cameras cut." Lennox stiffened. I was responding to noise. Didn't see anything. The camera going out wasn't me." "Why didn't you report the noise?" A long silence filled the room. Finally Lennox exhaled, voice thin. "Because I thought it was nothing. This place echoes. You learn to ignore half of what you hear." "Except ignoring things in a high-security prison creates problems," Marlowe said. Lennox looked down. "I know." Marlowe wrote something in his notebook. Lennox noticed. Fear tightened his expression. Something wasn't right. Marlowe then reviewed cell-to-cell statements. Conflicting stories poured in. One inmate swore he saw 2 guards arguing near the solitary door. Another claimed a tattooed inmate was escorted out of his cell early, but no paperwork backed it. A third insisted he heard metal scraping, like something being pried open. The prison ran on routines, and routines rarely broke by coincidence. A low-level informant, inmate Salazar, ink covering both arms, requested to speak privately. He leaned toward Marlowe, voice low. "You're asking the wrong people," Salazar whispered. "They won't tell you what you need." "And you will?" Salazar nodded. "If you listen." His eyes shifted toward the hallway, making sure no guard lingered. "Someone's been moving through the prison without clearance," he said. "Not a convict. A staff member. They're not doing it alone either." Marlowe's pen paused. Salazar continued, "There's a deal happening behind the walls. Something about trading access for information. Someone in your uniform is taking risks. A guard. Or more than one." Marlowe didn't show emotion, but internally the pieces began to shift. "What do you gain by telling me this?" he asked. Salazar smirked faintly. "Protection. And maybe a transfer out of this block before things go south." By afternoon, the atmosphere in the prison had changed. Guards walked in pairs. Inmates whispered across the yard despite orders to keep distance. The rumor mill churned faster than the investigation. Marlowe entered the surveillance office again. He pulled up the time-stamped footage one more time. Frame by frame. Corridor by corridor. Every hallway seemed clean. Every timestamp correct. Every door secured. Except one. A maintenance door near the utility tunnel showed a micro timestamp delay, half a second out of sync with the rest of the prison system. Barely noticeable. Someone had tampered with the entry logs. Marlowe's pulse stayed steady, but his jaw tightened. He traced the access list. 5 staff members. 2 supervisors. 1 maintenance officer. And 1 guard whose name had just surfaced in a conflicting report. Officer Lennox. But before Marlowe could pull the file, a sudden knock echoed on the office door. A breathless guard stepped in. "Sir, you need to come to C block now. We found something." Marlowe grabbed his notebook. "What is it?" The guard swallowed. "It's inside a vent near the solitary wing." He didn't finish the sentence. Marlowe didn't need him to. The urgency in his eyes was enough. Something hidden. Something someone wanted covered. Something that could reveal motive or expose betrayal. As Marlowe stepped into the cold corridor leading toward C block, the radios crackled simultaneously across the prison. "Lockdown request initiated. Immediate." The prison lights dimmed to emergency mode, casting long blue shadows against the concrete. Whatever they found, it was big enough to trigger a full security shift. Smash that like button, subscribe, and comment below if you want the untold stories from inside America's toughest cells. This is not for the faint-hearted. The early morning light barely filtered through the tiny barred windows of cell block C, casting long cold shadows across the cracked concrete floors. Inmate tattoos, faded and fresh, caught the dim rays as prisoners shifted uneasily. The tension was palpable. Every whispered conversation carried a weight heavier than the iron doors themselves. The aftermath of the lockdown still lingered like a scent in the air, a reminder of last week's riot and the failed escape attempt. Inmate Marcus Chains, Reynolds rubbed the inked sleeve on his forearm nervously. His eyes darted toward the surveillance cameras that blinked silently from the ceiling. Each guard rotation brought a new layer of scrutiny, each step echoing down the narrow corridor like a heartbeat racing toward inevitability. In the prison yard, tattoos peeked from under sweat-soaked shirts as inmates walked in careful silence. Prison gangs, uneasy from recent fractures in hierarchy, cast quick glances over their shoulders. Rumors of hidden weapons and secret alliances swirled like smoke. Behind the thick steel mesh, investigators hovered, blending into the shadows, notebooks in hand, piecing together every suspicious glance, every half-spoken sentence. A sharp metallic clang in the hallway sent a ripple of fear through the cell block. Guards reacted instantly, their patrols now tighter, more aggressive. They knew the inmates' desperation had only grown. Solitary confinement reports had surfaced, whispers that someone inside had cracked under pressure, revealing details of a hidden tunnel. The investigation intensified, but the truth remained just out of reach. In a narrow, dimly lit interrogation room, Detective Morales faced inmate Javier Knuckles Delgado. Tattoos snaked across his neck and knuckles, a roadmap of his violent past and alliances. Delgado's eyes were calm, calculating, hiding more than they revealed. Morales leaned in, voice low, a psychological chess match unfolding. Every answer Delgado gave twisted the investigation deeper into uncertainty, his words a mix of truth, half-truth, and calculated deception. Meanwhile, back in the block, shadows moved unnaturally. One inmate slipped past surveillance, a minor detail unnoticed in the chaos, yet enough to raise alarms later. Inside the control room, monitors flickered. Cameras briefly lost signal, a glitch that couldn't be ignored. Panic simmered beneath the surface as law enforcement officers realized someone inside the prison might be playing a dangerous game with the entire system. Night fell with an oppressive weight. Cell doors clanged in their rhythmic cadence, locking prisoners into isolation. Marcus pressed his forehead against the cold steel, aware that betrayal could come from anyone, a friend, a gang ally, or even a guard. Trust was a currency rarer than freedom, and right now it was in short supply. By midnight, whispers spread of a planned move, a secret attempt to manipulate the surveillance blind spots, to communicate across blocked lines. Fear and anticipation twisted together, every heartbeat a countdown to a potential disaster. The prison, normally a predictable machine of routine and control, had become a living, breathing organism of suspicion, danger, and unspoken rules. The chapter ended on a stark, chilling note. A small, anonymous message slipped under a cell door, words inked in smudged pen, "They're watching, but we have eyes too." Outside the cell, the flickering blue lights cast long, jagged shadows, a silent warning that the rising danger inside these walls was only beginning to take shape. Before we dive in, hit that like button, subscribe, and comment below if you want to uncover the hidden truths of America's most dangerous prisons. Every shadow tells a story. The prison hummed with an uneasy quiet. Cell doors clanged in slow, methodical rhythm, each echo bouncing off the concrete walls like a warning. Inmates with intricate tattoos etched across their arms, necks, and knuckles moved with subtle caution. Every glance, every shift of weight was a signal, a code in the silent language of survival. Detective Morales stood in the dim corridor outside Cell Block C, reviewing surveillance footage on a cracked tablet. The flickering blue glow reflected off his face, highlighting the strain in his eyes. Every camera angle, every shadowed corner had been scrutinized, but the real story was hidden in small gestures. A nod, a pause, a whispered word that revealed the invisible lines of allegiance inside the prison. Inside a solitary cell, Marcus Chains Reynolds sat cross-legged, tracing his tattooed forearm. He replayed the events in his mind, calculating risk, anticipating betrayal. Solitary confinement had warped his sense of time. The faint hum of the lights and distant clangs became his only measure of reality. He knew secrets were circulating, hidden alliances, corrupt guards, covert plans, and the walls themselves seemed to listen. In the yard, subtle shifts in gang dynamics became evident. Tattooed inmates exchanged cautious nods, aligning with new hierarchies while keeping eyes on rival factions. Investigators noted inconsistencies in statements, conflicting movements, and hidden gestures. Each clue, seemingly minor, painted a larger picture. The prison was less a facility of control and more a battlefield of psychology and survival. The control room became a hive of activity. Surveillance officers adjusted feeds, caught glitches, and replayed footage frame by frame. Blue light bathed the room, the glow reflecting off monitors filled with cell block shadows. One frame revealed a fleeting movement in a normally monitored corridor, an inmate slipping through a blind spot, carrying a small object. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it sparked an avalanche of questions. What had been hidden and who had helped? Morales moved to the interrogation room again. This time he confronted Delgado and two other inmates, all tattooed, all holding secrets. Their stories overlapped, contradicted, and revealed motives buried beneath layers of fear and strategy. Every revelation deepened the psychological complexity of the case. Desperation, coercion, and careful manipulation were tools wielded inside the walls as much as any physical weapon. As night fell, the prison transformed into a maze of shadows. Cell block corridors seemed longer, darker, more foreboding. Hidden alliances whispered through the air, secrets pressed into corners, and every guard rotation became a critical moment. The investigators pieced together connections between prisoners and staff, uncovering hidden deals, small betrayals, and coerced confessions. The chapter closed with a tense revelation, a previously overlooked piece of evidence. A crude drawing on a cell wall, inked by a tattooed hand, hinted at the orchestrator of the surveillance blind spots and the secret communication channels. The camera lingered on the jagged lines under the cold blue lights, a silent warning that the truth behind the walls was far darker and more calculated than anyone had imagined. Before the walls tell their final story, hit like, subscribe, and comment below. The truth inside these high-security cells is darker than you think. The prison thrummed with a nervous energy. Cell doors clanged in rhythm, echoing like a countdown. Inmates with tattoos visible on arms, necks, and hands moved cautiously, aware that every glance and every word could shift the fragile balance of control. Tonight, the consequences of weeks of tension, deception, and psychological games were about to collide. Detective Morales walked through the blue-lit corridors of cell block C, tablet in hand, reviewing the network of connections he had pieced together. The surveillance blind spots, the secret messages, and the subtle gestures of prisoners had led him to a crucial revelation. Someone inside the prison had been orchestrating manipulation, carefully guiding alliances and exploiting weaknesses. In the yard, Marcus, Chains, Reynolds, and Javier, Knuckles, Delgado were quietly summoned to an isolated meeting room. Their tattooed forms reflected under the flickering blue lights. Tension crackled in the air. Both knew that today would decide more than their fates. It would expose hidden power structures, secret plans, and the ultimate truth behind the recent escape attempt in lockdown. Inside the interrogation room, Morales confronted them. His voice was low, measured, but carried the weight of authority. Slowly, carefully, the inmates revealed pieces of the puzzle: coerced deals, manipulated alliances, and the subtle role of some guards who had turned a blind eye at critical moments. Every detail exposed the intricate, psychologically charged chessboard inside the prison. Meanwhile, in the control room, monitors displayed every movement in real time. Officers watched as inmates were strategically moved, corners cleared, and potential threats neutralized. The blue-toned lighting cast long shadows across the room, emphasizing the calculated precision of law enforcement and the fragile containment of chaos within the prison. Outside the cells, whispers carried through the hallways. Alliances shifted one last time. Tattooed hands gripped railings, eyes scanned corridors, and every heartbeat felt amplified. Marcus realized the danger of exposure. Betrayal could come from anyone, even those he trusted most. By midnight, the final confrontation unfolded. The orchestrator of the surveillance blind spots was identified, a tattooed inmate whose strategic manipulation had caused weeks of chaos. The inmate was isolated and escorted under heavy guard, their calculated calm replaced by the inevitability of exposure. Investigators pieced together the full network of complicity: inmates, minor guards, and hidden alliances all revealed. As the prison settled into tense silence, Morales stepped back, reviewing the aftermath. Every inmate returned to their cells, alliances tested, and secrets unveiled. Yet a lingering tension remained, a subtle reminder that even in the most controlled environment, shadows of deception, psychological games, and human ambition could never be fully eradicated. The final scene closed with the flickering blue lights of cell block C. A solitary note, smudged and half-hidden, lay unnoticed on the floor. It read, "The walls never forget." The camera lingered on the ink and shadows, a haunting reminder that the story of power, betrayal, and survival inside America's prisons never truly ends. If this prison case stunned you, the next one will be even darker. Subscribe so you don't miss it.